As you probably already know, the advent of extensive use of what we call artificial intelligence, or AI, has transformed how a lot of work is done. Programming is certainly one of the aspects of work or types of work that is being impacted, and I've been experimenting with allowing students to use AI in particularly 200 level programming classes. And the idea is that if you do get a job as a programmer, you're going to be expected to utilize AI to help be a more productive programmer. And what I've discovered so far is students have what I consider a bad habit of simply taking the written assignment, the words that I have written, and dropping them into the AI of their choice and hoping for the best. And then making some adjustments to the output. And so far, the results have been, okay, but not very efficient, I don't think. So right now we have the peculiar situation where a lot of AI usage is free. Somebody's paying for it, but not necessarily us, the small-time user. This will change. It has to change because these AI companies are going to need to be able to make enough money to pay for their very expensive data centers and the amount of electricity that they use and the people required to keep everything running. So how efficient you are in your use of AI, I think it's going to become more and more and more important. I also think that if I were on a search committee to hire a programmer these days, I would ask the question, what is your process for using AI to develop applications? So that's what I want to address today. So I've got a couple of documents here, and I've been working on this off and on for a while, and this is what I'm going to show you today is the version I like the best of everything that I've collaborated with AI to produce. And we're going to use the worksheet here, I'll show you in a moment, for class. So getting back to my point about if I were on a search committee, I would ask anybody I was interviewing, what's your process? And if your process is just, well, I'm just going to type something in and, cross my fingers, I'm probably going to move on, because process is important. And it's important to help you get to your desired output app code as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So with that in mind, let's look at what I have here. And this particular document here came from ChatGPT. I use Chat sometimes. I also use Microsoft Copilot a lot because we have KCTCS employees, and probably students too, have some sort of enterprise access right now, and I've never had to worry about running out of usage when I was doing something in Copilot. But this came from ChatGPT. So what this is a program specification document, more specifically a template, with some explanations. So, and that's what I want to talk about, is the explanations. And then we'll look at a a worksheet that you can fill in. That's a little bit different than this, but similar. And not all of these categories here or topics would need to be addressed for every app, but should give you an idea. And there's sometimes you might want to add things. So number one, you need a program overview, brief description of the program's purpose and scope. Now, that ought to be really obvious. Number two, you need to identify the user inputs, what type and where they come from. You might actually have a user sitting at the keyboard typing things in. You might be reading from a file of a certain type, but you need to specify that. And what we're doing here is this document here, we want to create something that we can give the AI as a starting point. And we're going to be telling it a lot of really specific things that we want our app to do. So that's the point here. So inputs are really important, and so are outputs. What do you want out? You want displayed to the screen. Usually, you probably want some sort of output to a file for so you can save this, etc. Now, here's something to keep in mind, and I've actually thought this about programming even before the rise of AI. Programming itself is not especially hard. The thinking involved in determining what you need to program is the hard part. And there's no difference here between traditional programming and AI as far as the preparation, the thinking part. So that's what we're looking at now, thinking about what is needed. Core features. Now, this is the more details you can add here, the better off you're going to be. And some of the things, I sit down at one of the applications that we worked on in previous semesters of this class. And right off the top of my head, I come up with like 17 different things that I wanted the app to do. So I had a list. And you may be sitting there freaking out. Well, no, it's really, for many applications, it's not that hard to come up with several behaviors that you want your app to perform. You just have to think it through. Number 5, GUI requirements. And one of the things we're going to do in this class is we're going to experiment with this whole idea of mock up your GUI in a drawing program and then feed in that graphic of what you want your app to look like. And of course, it doesn't hurt to add any sort of written description here that you can. Data storage. Now, this is an extension of your file output, and particularly file format and structure. 7, validation and error handling. This is something that I think a lot of times we don't spend the time and effort we need to, but you always need to have code and request code to check for the validity of an input. And if you have an improper input into a program, a lot of times it'll crash the program, which can lead to trouble. So, and what I mean here is, if you're doing something, if you have an input that's expecting an integer and the user inputs text, what happens? Well, your program better handle that and tell the user that they've input the wrong type of data and this is what's being expected. And your program should not crash. It should elegantly handle an improper input and basically prompt and wait for proper input. And You also need to check for validity as far as numbers or quantities. For example, if your app is looking for the user to input a grade point average, you don't want to accept a negative number. So all these things need to be checked here. And I'm not sure why ChatGPT put edge cases in here, because edge cases to me is more of a testing proposition. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Number 8, if you can think of anything what specific the program should not do or should do, you can be sure to note that, and any special usability rules. Constraints and limits, min-max values, I would put that up here under validation. So this is just to give you things to think about. I really would rearrange some of these things. Testing requirements, and this is one thing that I think is really nice about AI. You can request AI to not only create an app for you, but to create a test case suite. And you always want to test your code, because if there are problems, you want to find them before your users do. And I think this is one of the things where we don't spend enough time on this. Testing is going to be an important aspect of this class, along with the whole idea of documentation. So number 11 here, versioning instructions. And this is something we certainly want to do, because if you do 2 or 3 iterations of while you're developing your app, it's going to be easy to lose track of which is the latest version. So I don't have it handy, but I also have a list of things that I do tell the AI before I start a app development session. Such things as, I want version numbers. For every output, I want the complete listing of the code. Now, that works pretty well for our purposes, because we're developing relatively small apps. But typical AI behavior is, it'll say, oh, you want to change this, here's just the little block of code that you need to insert into your existing program. Now, when you're on the job and you're the app that you're either programming or maintaining, which is a big deal, maintaining apps that have been around for a long time, you probably don't want to request or ask for the whole output. So you need to be aware of the fact that at some point you're probably going to have to make changes just based on blocks of code. So the last thing there is documentation expectations. And I mentioned this whole idea of you're going to be maintaining previous code, and whoever follows you, including yourself, is going to be maintaining your code. So documentation, I know it's a pain, but it's going to save you a lot of trouble in the future. And a lot of places would hopefully have documentation specifications. This is what needs to be part of the documentation for any developed app. And if you're looking at this list here and thinking, boy, that's a pain. Yeah, but do you want a programming job? Do you want to get the big bucks? You need to be able to do these things. You need to be able to think, troubleshoot, document, make changes to existing code. These are what constitute professional behavior, even if you are using AI. So this document here, which I'll post on in Blackboard, these are typical categories and some explanation of what would go into those categories. Now, I followed this up with, wonder where that went. I followed this up with ChatGPT and I said, well, give me a worksheet suitable for use in class. So here we go. And this is, again, a little different, but it has most of the same different categories. So, program purpose, yeah, this is important. We need to know what the thing's supposed to do and who's going to use it. Now, this is terribly important too. You need to know your audience. Program description, and you may think this is the same as this. Not exactly. This is much more detail. Much more. Inputs, always important to know where your data is coming from, what it looks like, what format it's in, etc. Give an example if you can. Outputs, well, that's the purpose of this app, is to provide some sort of action or output. Again, what is going to be displayed or produced or saved. And again, if you can, the better your output description, the more successful and efficient you're going to be in your program or your app development. Processing, describe the major calculations or decisions the program must perform. And there are some examples. And again, the more depth, more detail here, the better off you're going to be. The variables you expect to use, and I mentioned a while ago that I have a list of instructions that I give the AI before I even really get rolling on an app development. One of which is always use meaningful variable names. None of this num1, num2, sum1, sum2. No, I want meaningful variable names. It's going to help in maintaining and troubleshooting and modifying your code for years to come. Constants, this is something else that you can add into your initial instructions. Any constant should be named and capitalized, etc. Anything that can be turned into a constant should be. Validation, we talked about this a while ago. Input validation is a big deal, I think. You need to validate for type and range, etc. Program logic, describe the decisions the program must make. So I would assume here, this is actually program speak here. You should be able to also do English phrases and let the AI interpret this. We talked about user interface design. Hopefully we're going to do a lot of this by actually doing layout in a drawing program and then inputting that along with this document, this worksheet. And those will be the things that instruct and inform the AI as to what we want for output. This section, the user interface design, what the user will see. So you probably need something like this if you're going to depend on a user at the keyboard entering information into your program. So that's for user input. If you're relying on file input, first does your program need to read or write files? And if yes, what type of files, what format they're in, etc. Same thing for writing output files. Error handling, I mentioned this a time or two, what errors could occur and what does the program do. In all situations, your program should elegantly handle an error without crashing and burning. Okay, so always keep that in mind. Testing, again, we don't do enough of this, And the good news is the AI will at least give you a really good start on what you should test. With Python, you can actually ask it for information that you can use directly with PyTest, which is a big labor saver. Now you need to look through this and make sure that all valid aspects that need to be tested are covered. But good start. AI assistance log. This is probably just for documentation purposes, so that somebody next year can look at this and say, "Oh, this AI was used for this, but not for this," etc. And this is something, again, this kind of thing that a lot of students don't want to do this, but as part of your process, you should look at what worked as far as your process and what problems you had and maybe what you could do better or differently next time to avoid that problem. And it's probably something like add more detail on XYZ, whatever that is. So this is a worksheet, and we'll use this. I don't necessarily think it's the ultimate, but it's the best thing I've come up with so far. And certain situations, there may be some of these you don't use, but there's most of them. I think there's, all of these are pertinent to the development of an AI assisted app. So we'll see how it works. And again, when you have your interview and someone asks you about using AI, you can, if they don't specifically ask, you can say, well, my process is, I start out with a program development specification, I work up a user interface, and I feed that into the AI, and I evaluate the output of the AI against what I need, and then make an adjustment and do another iteration. That's going to be much more impressive than this blank look on your face. And maybe you say, "Wow, I can use AI. I use it in class." Well, but what's your process? And process is a big deal in the workplace. We will make adjustments to this as we go.